Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland a fantastic place to live, work, and play. I'm Christina Egan, your host. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of water systems, particularly wastewater. Now, you may say this isn't a really racy topic, but I hope you stay tuned because it is fascinating. Wastewater systems play a critical role in our community, and there are a lot of innovative efforts to make them more resilient and sustainable as we face more and more extreme weather and climate change. Joining us today, we have Emily Prescott, the Planning Director of Saco, Maine. She brings a wealth of experience in urban planning and has also played a really pivotal role in developing sustainable infrastructure within the Saco community. We also are joined by Howard Carter, the Director of the Water Resource Recovery Department, which I remarked to him before is a mouthful, but we're going to dive into why it's called Water Resource Recovery today. And he is also in Saco, Maine. Howard is at the forefront of transforming wastewater systems into to be able to adapt to climate change impacts and also to enhance efficiency. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you, Christina. I'm glad to be here.
And thank you so much, Howard, for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
It's great to have you. And if you'd like to join the conversation with Howard and Emily, please call in to 780-4909. Again, I'll say that a little slower, 780-4909. So, Emily, I'm going to start with you and ask you just to give us like the basics. Okay, so we all drink water, we all use water, we all flush water. Tell me a little bit about the systems that help us do that in Maine.
Yeah, so just from a very high level, we all rely on these very large systems that no one really sees the back end of how they're operating and all the people that make them work. And so on the drinking water side, we have a lot of people who are testing your water, making sure that it's clean, coming through the pipes, making sure that the pipes are maintained. On the wastewater side, the same thing. We're making sure that the wastewater is leaving your house efficiently, making sure that those pipes are maintained. We have a lot of aging infrastructure, so there's a lot of great work happening all throughout the systems. On stormwater, we have to make sure that those stormwater systems are maintained as well and that we have operating them efficiently so that the water can eventually get back to its original resource, whatever that be. In our case, it's the Saco River.
Okay, so tell us just a little bit more. What's the difference between stormwater and wastewater?
Yeah, great question. So stormwater is like rainwater that falls from the sky and enters, maybe like a paved surface or other types of surfaces, and then falls into pipes that then will lead back to the river and gets to some sort of level of treatment along the way. Wastewater is the water that when you flush your toilet, it's what leaves your house. It's what goes down your sink after you wash your hands. And that goes through a system of pipes as well. In some cases, they're separated. In some cases, they're combined. But most of the time, they're separated. And they'll leave your house and then go to the wastewater treatment plant for processing and for cleaning the water.
Got it. Yeah, so stormwater and wastewater are both carrying certain types of waste or contaminants that need to be treated. Is that right?
Yes.
Got it. So Howard, your department is called the Water Resource Recovery. Mm-hmm. It's not called sewer. It's not called wastewater. Tell me why it's called resource recovery.
Well, I think that's, as an industry, we started changing that about 10 years ago, just to folks are aware of the nutrients in the valuable resources that are actually going out our pipes, whether that's phosphorus, where there's a limited amount in the world, or nutrients, or different technology to capture that type of stuff. There's new technology coming out now that can actually take wastewater and make it into a disinfectant like hypochlorous acid or even produce hydrogen.
Wow.
So these are all things coming up into the future that we can really grab from that. And then in New England, we happen to be water rich, but in other parts of the country like California or Arizona or the Southwest, there is a very big lack of water. So they actually take wastewater and turn it into drinking water.
And that's safe.
No, not safe. Oh, yeah, they go through different processes. Or there's other parts of the country where they have like the purple pipe, they'll call it, an effluent pipe, that they'll spray road mediums or golf courses with.
Okay.
So there's a big push to recover all that water.
So I want to focus a little bit more on wastewater in particular, knowing that there's drinking water and there's also stormwater, but wastewater is what's coming out of our homes and our businesses. And Emily, can you tell us a little bit about where in our region there is wastewater versus probably septic?
Yeah. So, good question. So, a lot of Maine still relies on septic systems. A lot of northern Maine, really southern Maine has the most, as far as I'm aware, of the most sewered areas. I don't know if Howard has any additional detail on that.
No, every coastal community, almost every community in Greater Portland has its own treatment plant, and any place that's a service center certainly has a treatment plant.
So kind of a
I
downtown.
think there's, last I knew, there was over 200 wastewater plants in the state of Maine. Yeah.
That is way more than I thought. That's kind of shocking, actually.
Yeah, but you'll have a lot of the big facilities like a paper mill or an IDEX or those type of things would have their own type of treatment plant
Okay.
right on site.
And how does having a wastewater treatment facility help a community? Emily?
Yeah, so we can already see how quickly southern Maine is growing. And so a lot of that is reliant on having the density that we need to build out and having the wastewater services that we need to support the commercial development and the other economic development perspectives and initiatives coming forward. So what it does is it really allows you to tap into building at a more dense rate for housing. So it could definitely help with the housing crisis. And if we really take the time to invest in these infrastructure services now, then we can build out the best way possible to support the density that a lot of Maine needs.
So for folks that are on wastewater and may have moved to Maine, they might not really understand what a septic system does and how it's different from a wastewater system. Can you explain that really quickly?
Sure. A septic system treats wastewater really on your own private property, and it goes through, depends on the type of system you have, but usually the waste leaves your house. There's a septic holding tank involved, and then there'll be a leach field. The leach field is what allows the liquid part of the wastewater to permeate and eventually get cleaned out enough to be returned to the ground. So there's a system of sometimes there are trenches, there's stone involved. So it depends on what system you have. There's different types of systems. We're coastal, so there's some proprietary systems that are better for smaller coastal lots in places that are not served by wastewater. But in general, you are relying on having your septic tank pumped out every so often, and then the water gets returned to the ground in some form.
That's great. And Howard, we were talking a little bit about where there's wastewater and where there's more septic. And in our region, we have some rural communities that still have septic, but other places that have been traditionally rural have started investing in wastewater systems. We were talking a little bit before the show about Bridgeton and about North Windham. Can you explain a little bit about what might be encouraging some of those communities to make these major investments in wastewater?
Well, I think Bridgeton's had a treatment plan for a while, but North Windham in particular, I think they were just built out, and then they start to have nutrient issues and stuff with the lake, and in order to grow or economic development, you really need the infrastructure to support that. So I think that would help them grow out farther around the area, and that's all eventually, I believe, is going to come down to the Portland Water District at some point. And
So,
they are building a new treatment plant by one of the schools too right
yeah,
now. So,
right in the North Windham area.
So that would have helped them with residential and commercial growth.
So let's talk a little bit about what you've been doing in Saco, Howard. You have done a major upgrade of the Saco wastewater treatment. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to do that?
Well, right. This is a project that we actually started looking at in 2017. Back when I was at the facility close to 30 years ago, we used to back up because of a high tide or a king tide a couple times a year. Now we're at the point that it's 30 to 40 times a year. It just happens that the tide becomes so high in the river, or the level of the river, that by gravity we can't push the incoming water out. So it starts to surcharge some tanks. So we started looking at that in 17, and in 2019 we did a big resiliency study with the climate change and the sea level rise that was coming up. Then we actually entered into an agreement with the US EPA. We did this augmented analysis study, and we did a community group. We had the mayor-appointed coastal resiliency group that we went through 4 or 5 different options and how we wanted to upgrade this facility, what kind of public amenities they'd want, like green space and bathrooms and the boat ramp. Also, while meeting new requirements for nutrients, usually on the coast, we're going to start having nitrogen requirements on a discharge. You're seeing some of that happen now in Casco Bay. That'll be spreading around to all the coastal communities. And we still have what we call combined sewer discharge overflows. So what that is, what Emily was alluding to earlier, where your storm system or the square catch basins you see in the streets, some of them are still tied into the sewer. So once you get such a load or a heavy rain, some of that discharges directly to the river. Now in Saco, 30 years ago, we had 9 of them. We're down to 1 now.
Nine different.
9 different overflow points that will go to the river.
Going right into the river.
Right. So in Saco, we have 1 left, and we're trying to incorporate that closure or mitigation in this upgrade. Now, the upgrade hasn't started yet. It's all designed. We have the contractor on board. We're hopefully to get started in the next month or so to get that. And that's going to be a 3-year project.
So it's always a good day for me when I get to get out of the office, and I came down and was able to visit your treatment facility in Saco a few months ago. And you were explaining some of the things that you were changing about the building and the property and in order to deal with the rising levels in the Saco River. Tell me a little bit about those.
Right. So I think it's important to know that part of the Governor's Climate Council, they put out Maine Can't Wait, that publication, and it just so happens the Saco wastewater facility was listed as a critical piece of infrastructure that was going to be impacted to sea level rise. So part of our upgrade is to raise those critical components up farther back and up out of the watershed
So
higher.
physically lifting
the
out.
whole.
Yep.
So basically, we're building a brand new treatment plant.
Wow.
And it can no longer be gravity in and gravity out. It's going to have to be pumped. So we have
Pump
to
to higher ground.
pump to the
treat
higher
them.
facility to treat it.
Yep.
Then it'll gravity out. But we're also going to use new technology like UV disinfection, so we don't have to use the chlorine bleach anymore. We're actually using filters so we can get like tertiary treatment. It wouldn't be drinking water quality, but it would be a lot closer than the standard.
I remember you telling me, Howard, when I came down, we were looking at where the pipe actually discharged into the river. It was like the middle of the river, and you told me that water is cleaner than the river water.
Yeah, it typically is, yes.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, so, yeah, it was pretty scary down there just a couple of weeks ago when we had the June flood. We were, speaking of sea level rise, we were just a couple inches from flooding out the facility at that point, so.
And with the new facility, would it have been okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, we're taking all that in effect. A lot of things are coming up on like 5 feet, just the driveway and all those type of things in the green space.
You're listening right now to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the issues we face in Greater Portland and the movers and shakers leading the way. I've got 2 of them here in the studio today. We're here with Emily Prescott, the Director of Planning for the City of Saco, and Howard Carter, who is the Director of Water Resource Recovery at the City of Saco. You can call in at 780-4909, 780-4909 if you'd like to join the conversation and ask Howard or Emily a question about their very interesting work. So I want to learn a little bit more about the cost of this project. I know it's significant, and you also needed some public support to help pay for it. Emily, tell me a little bit, as you've been working for the city, how you developed the project with the public and also got support for the cost of paying for the project.
Yeah, well, I give Howard a lot of credit. He made great connections, and Saco was actually chosen 1 out of 3 communities to highlight the U.S. EPA's pilot program for augmented alternative analysis. So it's a planning tool directly related to utility work and how we integrate community priorities into our planning for resiliency measures or large-scale utility upgrades in general. And so that was a huge piece of the puzzle of connecting our community members with the concern we had, which was obviously we had already experienced there were tanks that had flooded out into the parking lot. And so sharing that at a broader community scale through using our social media channels, we have a great communications team in Saco as well. Sharing the story about what was happening was really critical for the community, then connecting to this planning tool, and then working with the council to set up the Coastal Resiliency Ad Hoc Committee, which was appointed by the mayor at the time. And through that work, using that tool, the US EPA was actually right on board with us. We had consultants with them as well. We were able to really impart the importance of this infrastructure initiative and show that this is really foundational to the next steps of the community growing. So there's also a school coming forward that's been in the planning stages for a little while, and just showing that, well, we really need to have this so that we can support, we need to have a really good wastewater system and make sure that we are not in jeopardy of climate change concerns, extreme weather events, flooding, so that we can support the growth that we need in the school system and support the growth that we need in housing and economic development. So really showing that this is foundational and that the community could support it, and there was enough, we had the capacity to bond as well within our within our finances at the time.
I mean, wastewater sisters are like virtually invisible. I mean, you can see the grates on the street, but most people are not thinking after they get out of the shower where the water went, right? So educating the community about the importance of this invisible system must have been challenging. Were there things that you did that really helped people understand the connection between this investment and the future quality of life in Saco?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And out of sight, out of mind. And that's something we've been dealing with as utilities since they've been around, and we'll say 60, 70 years. You know, we don't want the public to know where we are or any of those type of things. That whole mindset has to change because we have a lot of aging infrastructure. We really need a lot of investment in the infrastructure that we have. For years, the water and sewer bills have been very cheap enough that nobody really notices them, but that has a detriment on the life expectancy of these things as well.
Because they have to be maintained just like a
Right.
road, right?
Right. So when we went to the council and the voters, we said we were going to have a periodic set of rate increases to pay for this. And even with that, even with the new school, we had like I think a 65% favorable rate for the new
Wow.
treatment plant.
It's hard to
on
get
Vermont.
65% of the American population to agree on anything.
Yeah, so we
That's great.
were quite proud of that. But coming with that is going to the town, going to the Pumpkin Fest parades, and
Yes.
and the National Night Out, and knowing who we are, and Emily and I, our two departments, we work together quite closely on a lot of those things, and it goes back to economic development. We've had our communication department make videos about economic development or workforce, or the aging workforce, and those type of things. That's really helping us getting the word out, and I think as water utilities, we're just going to have to do more and more of that.
So, Emily, you mentioned that you got the community to pass a bond for this. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So Howard and I went on a community tour, I would say, and we went to where the people were,
Yep.
so we used a lot of planning principles.
Like the pumpkin parade? Is that what you, yeah.
The Pumpkin Fest, yeah.
Fest, yeah.
And then we went to National Night Out, which is usually a policing initiative, but it's a great opportunity to connect with the community. So we did things that we did not just sit in public meetings and talk about this or go to public hearings. We actually got out and spread the word. We had our own little logo. We had we had our own little branding of the whole project and everything along the way. And we worked closely with communications department on that as well. We did a series of videos. We really shared the message as broadly as we could and tapped into that planning tool by the US EPA. So it was a really good partnership. And Howard and I have kind of kept this going and try to share the importance of strengthening that relationship between planning and wastewater services and water utilities, try to get that word out statewide.
Yeah.
So you have bond money, you have ratepayer money. Is there other types of money from the
Yes.
feds or the state?
Yeah, don't mention, we actually did a lot of work with the Chamber of Commerce and those type of folks, too, for support. Oh, yes. We've been very fortunate that Senator King, Senator Collins, and Representative Pingree have all funded us through some of the congressional district spending.
Yep.
So that's helped us to the tune of almost $9 million
Yeah.
to help supplement that bond, which is good because since the pandemic, rates have just been going up. Cost of construction and materials have been going up and up and up, and we've actually needed that money just to stay even with our project. So we get to the point that we finally, in December, signed a not-to-exceed contract price for this project, and we're just waiting now to finally get going.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
and
congratulations.
and the state's been very helpful with us as well with the state revolving loan fund. So really no complaints on our end at all.
Well,
So,
big infrastructure projects, whether they're wastewater or transportation or something, energy, they take a lot of time, a lot of different partners to put together, and then a lot of community support. So it's no small feat. I mean, really, a big congratulations to Saco. I mean, I think it's going to be a model that many other places are going to be looking to, especially since it sounds like you're really on the cutting edge of making sure that your facility is ready for sea level rise, but you're also using some cutting edge technology.
Yes, and this is fairly new technology to this country. We'll probably be like the 10th one in the country now. But remember, we started planning this years ago. By then, there was just a few. It's pretty big in Europe, but that's really going to help reduce our nutrients to the river as well as phosphorus. Because, like I said, those requirements are coming. And so, yes, we want to be on the cutting edge of that, reduce that final combined sewer overflow, set the community up for growth, whether it's commercially or residentially, and be ready for resiliency.
That sounds
all
great.
Of those. It's all in one shot.
So let's scope back a little bit. We've talked about the Saco project, but I know that both of you are involved in kind of Maine-wide issues around water and wastewater. What are some of the biggest challenges, and Emily, I'll start with you. What are some of the biggest challenges that you think our state is facing as you think about the future of how Mainers use water?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the bigger things that we're facing is there's been some policy changes around emerging contaminants of concern, such as PFAS, and microplastics is another one coming
These are
down the road.
the forever chemicals, so-called forever chemicals.
Yeah, PFAS are the forever chemicals. So there's been a switch to putting the normal solids from wastewater treatment plants into landfills. And so with that, we just need to plan out how we are going to operate landfills going forward, as well as where is the capacity to handle the solids that are going into the landfill. So the Maine DEP did work on a study for a biosolids master plan for the state and evaluated not only landfill capacity, but also some additional future treatment technologies.
Can you connect the dots for our listeners about having PFAS in a landfill and what that means for water?
So there's a much broader picture or conversation here that we can have probably another day. But in general, there was concern about their containing the PFAS, any PFAS concerns from solids. So the solution was to put everything into landfills, at least for the time being. And for us long term, looking at the impact of that and what can be recovered from what's going into landfills now would be good. But anyway, the DEP looked at that study, completed a biosolid study just very recently. It's on the DEP webpage. We was finished in about December. But the other big things that are really impactful that we've all felt, like the January storms, climate and resiliency is a big piece of it. Whether that be pump stations that are threatened with being overloaded with water.
Overloaded or electrically shorting out because they're inundated with water, sure.
And a lot of these systems are low-lying because,
Yes.
the water has to flow down, and that's where you treat it. So
Right.
inherently vulnerable, many of them?
Many of them
Yep.
are, sure.
Yep. And then also we've identified that there's a huge concern that's being termed the silver tsunami on water workers, and we're going to have a gap of people aging out of some of the jobs and having the replacements coming forward, and people who want to work in water is a primary topic of concern, not only in Maine but also nationally.
Across the country. I think the median age in the water workforce is like 56.
All right, so make your best pitch about why our listeners should get into the water industry.
Well, it doesn't really matter if you're an operator, utility director, or an engineer. These jobs are basically recession-proof. As you can think about flushing your toilet, those jobs are not going anywhere.
We're always going to be doing that,
There's
aren't we?
always going to be doing that. And what's exciting about the field, no matter which discipline you're in, it's something different every day. There's new challenges to overcome. You get in to meet with the folks. We're a close-knit community, all of us, and we can call up almost anybody from across the country once you get into it. And they're rewarding jobs. You can go home at night and know you made a difference that day, whether it's for public health or for the environment or for recreational purposes, or business development, or any of those type of things.
A lot of the folks that come to work at the Greater Portland Council of Governments when they're in their 20s, they're really interested in sustainability and climate. And one of the things that we seek to teach them is that you can get involved in transportation, water, housing, and really make a climate impact. And it sounds to me like wastewater is another one of those places where if you're interested in climate, it'd be a good place to work.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's a ton of different jobs. Out of my career, I can almost count on one hand how many people actually get out of the industry. They may go from an engineer to a utility director, or an operator to an engineer, or equipment salesperson, but they never really leave.
Yeah.
They just switch what they're doing.
And I think now you're going to see more than ever an expansion with the types of water jobs. So there's always been a broad type of job, engineer, operator, utility leader, but now you can also see planners in the mix. Mm-hmm. And we need our transportation folks to be planning with us on where utility lines are running. And so there's just a huge connection. We need the housing, people who are interested in housing to know the foundational need of what they're going to need to support those future homes. So I think that there's just a huge, everyone needs water. So water touches everything, right, Howard?
Water is life. Yep.
Well, I'm going to ask you one last question, although that would have been a great way to end the show, water is life. But if you could wave your magic wand, what's the one thing that you would change to help make sure that we're managing all of our water in a good way in Maine? Emily, this is rapid fire.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. My big thing is connections and partnerships. So having the conversations about where our infrastructure is vulnerable is like the first step of that, and really getting community involvement and understanding what the needs are.
Yeah. Howard?
I think it's just general knowledge about water as it is. Here in New England, we have excess of water. Other parts of the country don't have enough water. It's just take care of the water we have, whether it's don't over-fertilize your lawn, add into the stormwater or the nutrient problem, or conserve the water that we do have, and be cognizant of what you're dumping down your toilet, whether it's the non-flushable wipes or any of those type of things, or grease that really causes issues farther down the line for us people in the water field.
We all have a responsibility to take care of this precious resource that is life.
Exactly.
Well, Howard, Emily, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks also to Anella, our sound engineer, and WMPG, who collaborates with the Greater Portland Council of Governments in producing this show. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio. Join us next week for another conversation about the great work that's happening in our communities. And until then, be kind to yourself and to each other. I'm Christina Egan. See you next time on Let's Connect Greater Portland.